Bird. So welcome everyone to the Hiding Winter Owl Drawing. I know we're so happy that winter is sort of in our background at this point, but usually we do still kind of have we can have winter weather around here. And um, anyway, oh, thank you. I love owls. So any chance I get that a library picks an owl, I'm so happy about it. Again, I'm sorry. My name's Anita Thompson. For those that are new, I recognize some new names on here. I also recognize as I call them, the usual suspects. So I'm so happy that you're still here with us. This is being recorded. I will get this out to Karen and Rebecca this evening. They will get it out to you as soon as they can. But sometimes there's a delay. There may or may not be. But just so you know, you may not get it tomorrow. You may get it, a few days from now or whatever. But you will receive it. We're using either an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper or 9 by 12. If you want to do it smaller or bigger, that's fine. And then basically just a regular pencil with an eraser and then something to smooth your shading with. This is called a tortillon or a shading instrument. If you have this, if not, you can use a Q-tip. You can use your finger. You can use your shirt. That's Rebecca's. Anything that you have to kind of smudge. I love it. Okay, so we're going to get started. And oh yeah, I love it. A Prismacolor colorless blender would be awesome too. Yeah, if you have that, absolutely. I love those. Um, Absolutely. So anything that you have to smudge would be very beneficial. So this is going to be the most of the full length of our paper here. And so we want to make sure that we have enough room on the left side for our owl friend. So we're going to start sort of a little bit going towards halfway into the paper on this side. And yes. Oh, wait, did I just see? Oh, buying this item online. Yes. For the colorless blenders, you can buy those online. Absolutely. I think that Michael's sometimes has them as well. Um, I can send an email for anybody that's on my newsletter, and I will put a link. I'll also show you. I feel like I have one in front of me somewhere, but if I remember towards the end of this, just remind me, and I will show you what it looks like. They're great because, especially with colored pencil, they're terrific. Um, but yeah, you can order them online. Okay, so we're going to start at the top of our paper, but go down about an inch in order to draw. First, we're drawing the tree, and you want to go lightly, but I'm going to go darker so you can see it on Zoom. I'm also going to kind of zoom in here. You're welcome, Lisa. Yeah, art supplies are fun. Um, it's just so fun to find out about different supplies from people, I think. So what we're going to do is we're going to create, first the line for the tree. And then we have a little bit of an interruption for our owl. And so we're just going to very kind of quickly just sketch in. I mean, I'll give you time, but we're going to just kind of sketch in the shape of the owl's ears and just like a basic body shape, right? So the head, and we can adjust this, and we will be adjusting it as we continue. But we just want to kind of draw in a basic shape of our owl. So kind of like a silhouette. And again, you want this to be light because we will be going back and making parts of it a little darker, making parts of it a little lighter. But we just want to get in the basic shape and about how far it will be sticking out from the tree. Now, again, we'll go back and we're going to kind of manipulate this, but he's kind of, sticking out there. And then we're going to kind of continue with the rest of the shape of the tree. Now, I'm going to give you time in order to kind of, catch up, but I'm just kind of drawing this in real fast, just so you can kind of see about the shape. And again, I'll manipulate this a little more once we start, but I'm just drawing in sort of the basic shape of the way that the tree is going. I think I want to make this go a little bit more slanted. Like so. But we just want to make sure that we get in the basic shape of the tree and the owl so that we fit it onto our paper. So if you're having issues right now where you realize, oh, maybe the owl is too close to the edge here, or your tree isn't, it's a little too straight, you can fix that now. And we will still have time to fix, but always with drawing, looking at the overall shape of things and kind of sketching in the full, sort of looking at it as an overgeneralization of the basic shape of something really helps. And then you go in for the details. As you're doing that, I'm just going to double check to see if I have the colorless blender in front of me. I had it I had this thing on the wall with some art supplies, and I had it there at one point. But I may have taken it down. Oops. Okay, so we're going to start with the tree. And so, again, we want to make sure that what we're looking at, so if I can use my pencil as sort of a measuring tool in the sense of, how far does his head stick out? And so I can kind of, look at my other drawing and kind of use it as a tool. Um, you can also just kind of eyeball it and see that, it is sticking out. There's a little bit, I made a little bit more room with his head, but I also realize I think the bump over here needs to go a little bumpier. But we're going to start now making each section of the tree a little more realistic. So we've got some shapes in here that we're going to be shading, but we're going to treat those as, drawing in the shapes. So I'm going to go in very close. And show you what I mean. So for instance, we have some basic shapes here that is the shading. And so I'm drawing them as shapes. I'm going to make these darker so you can see it on Zoom because I'm realizing it doesn't show up as much. Again, everything should be rather light as you're drawing it. because we don't want it to be so solid that we then have to, there's lines that are darker, because especially when you're doing a graphite drawing, right, with graphite, you want certain lines to be darker and then other lines to be more shaded. And it's much easier to do that when you just start off, light. So here are the shapes, and then we have the curve of the tree, right? We're going down, and about right where the curve of the tree is, kind of like underneath, should be starting the top of the nose for our owl. And so we can go ahead and kind of sketch in the shape of the top of the nose. Right. And that's a little bit of, the feathers. But as always, we'll go back. We're just looking for basic shapes right now. And then once we have that, we're now going to draw our attention to this section. And so again, we have another shape that we're going to create to make it look more, more shaded, right? This is kind of texture. And now what I'm doing is kind of drawing in the next shape of where the texture would be. This is that sort of, I'm just going to show this up close. So right here, right? So I'm now kind of drawing that in, and we'll later on, we'll create it to look much more, like it does there. But I'm drawing in, as best as possible. It's okay if it doesn't look exactly like mine. Drawing in that shape. So we overgeneralized it at first. And now we're making it look much more detailed in the shape that it is. Right? And then it kind of goes like this. And again, I'm just looking at that overall shape and drawing it in so that when I start to shade, I already have a plan. And I've probably said this before, but I always say it with drawing or any art. I feel like you kind of need like a map, right? So you create your own map of where things are ahead of time. So you pre-plan it out, and then there's no guesswork, when, at least for the drawing foundation of it. Once you have the drawing down, you can then have fun with the rest of it, I think. Because it's already kind of planned out and you can adjust as you need. So we have a few lighter areas where we're just going to kind of draw in that are shaded. Right. And so again, I'm drawing in kind of like basically the basic shapes of them. That's why they're light. This one's kind of going down next to the tree area. I'm just going to use it as a line for right now. So this is right here. Right. And it's going to start to kind of bend to the right. And then we have kind of this weird shape here. And again, this is just to sketch in an idea of where that shape is going. But then later on, we will adjust it. We're now going to come over here and just add another kind of shaded line. Okay. And then we're actually going to switch on over to our owl. So, we'll come back and we'll start shading everything, but we have the basics for the tree right now. Most of the basics. We do have a few other areas that actually just three more. Let's go ahead and add those in. So going down about right here, we just have some, three small shaded shapes like this. To the right of our tree. Okay. And now we're going over to the left for the owl. Okay, so we're going to work from the nose up, and our nose is kind of going to be our sort of our halfway point, if that makes sense. Um, so we have the nose area, and we're now going to create the shape where the eye is kind of anchored. So here is our ears. I'm going to draw a little bit of a line across here. So again, all this is sort of light. I'm going to add a little light to our drawing here. And this is going to be the part where we add in the eye. Okay, so we're now going to start adding in the eye. So we have, a bit of the kind of like the area that's sort of a little bit of like a lid right here. And then we have the actual eyeball. And we're going to make our pupil underneath. So we're going to make a kind of a roundish circle, right? And then we want to make kind of a line through it because, and I'm going to go even closer now so that you can see the detail. So basically, the reason we have a line through it is when we start shading, we're going to be shading around that line. That is the light that's entering the eye. And we're going to go right underneath the eye and add a little bit of a shape like this because we also know that that part is going to be lighter than the rest. And now we're going to start sort of up top or continue going up top. I am going to adjust the head on mine because I made it a little too close to the eye. So if you did too, you can adjust it as well. And that's why, we do things like drawing lightly. So I wanted some more room between the head and the eye here. And then we're going to start sketching in a little more of the shape of the ear. So adding a little bit of a, instead of being pointier here, right? We add this shape, and then there is a bit of the feathers happening here. And I'm gonna flatten this out. So this is why, as I mentioned, you know, we want to draw it lightly because we always go back, we generalize the shape, and sometimes, you know, we have to go back and make it a little more, you know, fix the detail a little bit. Underneath, we have another portion of the ear. And so here, we're going to add a little bit of a, almost like a wing shape, right? It's going to be a little more rounded than what I drew it. And then we're going to go back underneath where the eye is because, so we have a bit of some feathers, feather shape that is happening here. And I'm going to draw this in lightly because again, when we go to kind of draw it, it's going to be shaded. And I think I have to make the nose a tad bit longer. And we have a bit of, you know, a little bit of white feathering here too. So just kind of drawing in, again, a little bit of a shape with that. Later on, we will smooth it out a little. And then we're starting with the wing. So this is the wing here, this shape here. So our wing starts here. Curve a little bit. And we kind of go, it's not exactly straight down, but there's a, you know, a length to it. We have sort of the rest of the area of the wing here. And then we're going to adjust the shape of the owl here again. So again, kind of drew it in like this, but we're going to make it a little more roundish in this section. So you want to kind of erase that part. And we're going to come back up here toward the head. We're going to make it round. And then when we come here, a little less pointy and a little further out. And then with this section, it's pretty fine, but what we're going to do is we're now going to go in with this line more towards the wing. So I erased a little bit down here to fix it, and now we're going to go in toward the wing, which is here. And what might be helpful is to start up here or down here. And kind of make it a little more slanted. So the way I originally showed you how to draw it, it was still upright. But now we're going to make it a little more slanted so that it's really hiding. And then we're going to erase the bottom area and then make it come out here, which is the rest of the tree. Okay. So now that we have that all drawn in, we're now going to go back and we're going to now start making the rest of the tree trunk area more realistic. So I'm going to go up a little with my camera here, and we're now going to move over to the right side with our tree. So we're going to start shading in some of those areas. And so I'm going to do a quick demonstration of some shading. So with shading, we think about basically, you know, in a basic, if we're talking about basic shading, light, medium, dark. So if I were to go really light, I'm just shading in the box. And this is just, you know, demonstrating when I mentioned to you, do some light shading. So we start off really light. Our next box, we're going to get a little darker. Right? And so what we do is we start to apply more pressure. I'm doing this very fast, but you can already see that it's almost like a gradient. And then I'm going to go really dark. The reason I'm showing this to you, and I'm going to do one more here so that it's pretty dark. And so I really press. So the reason I'm showing this to you is because when I say we're going to go really light, you will have sort of a visual of what I mean. So very light, number one, is this one. We go a little bit light medium is the next. This is sort of medium. And then this is the darkest, which would be pretty much black. There's going to be areas we're going to be using all of those for the fur. Okay, so just wanted to kind of show you that. It's called a value scale. For those that aren't familiar, value scale, and a value is how light or dark the shading is. You know, you can find YouTube videos about it if you're interested. It's good to practice so that in certain areas, you know, it's lighter, and then medium, and then really dark. That's how we create realism. All right, so let's get started. All right, back to our tree here. So we're going to go light with everything first. So thinking about this, okay, this value right here. And so we're going to just, even though these areas are going to be a lot darker, we're going to kind of shade a little bit of these areas, just, quickly. You don't have to do it as fast as I do. But basically, we want to give a little bit of a gray, kind of a little bit of some shading in these areas. Oh, one more. Sorry. This one here. We're going to keep going with the shapes here on the right side. So we're kind of filling in those shapes with some light gray shading. That's a good question. Right now, it doesn't matter as much, but it would be good to kind of shade sort of in a downward direction, sort of like, I guess, left to right. Yeah, so we don't want to shade this way yet, or this way. Yes, northeast to southwest. I love it. Beautiful. Yes. So that was a great question, by the way. And that does matter when you're trying to create realism. Um, I take a look at some drawings, from anywhere, and start to recognize, which direction the shading goes. Even with colored pencil, you're able, sometimes you're able to see it. And it makes a difference because the way that you shade something will help with that looking more realistic, especially things that have volume, right? Something that is supposed to look round. If something is supposed to look a little more round, we usually shade um, like this. And that helps create, like if I were doing a vase, right? If I do this, I don't know if you can already tell, but it's giving it volume. If I were to shade like this, so here is another kind of circle. If I just shade up and down, I don't get that same feeling of there being, this is sort of round, right? So already that is showing that, oh, this is a ball or something. Okay, so going back to this, we're going to come down here and again, just a quick kind of shading. Basically, what we're going to be doing is we are going to be using our shading instrument to lighten these up a little bit. Okay. All right, so we have that. And now we're going to grab our tortillon or whatever instrument we're using to kind of soften our lines. And so we're going to go in. And again, this is just kind of, we're just softening our lines. Let me move my camera a little more. So right now what we're doing is we're just softening all the lines that we just created for the shading areas. Now what we're going to do is we're going to pick up our pencil again. And so this tree has volume. So what I just showed you over here right? With kind of the circle. We're gonna now make lines that are going kind of in a, it's almost like a smile, right? Like roundish. So we're gonna do that starting up here. We're gonna create some light shading, even lighter than we just did, up here in between these two areas. And if you can see, let me go in a bit closer. So what I'm doing, you see those lines are not straight lines. They're kind of curved. And you see, I'm skipping space because I'm trying to recreate the texture of the bark. So, if you've ever, sure, a lot of us have looked at a tree, looked at the bark up close, right? And it's sort of split in areas. We're recreating that. And then we're going to come over here and we're also going to create some even lighter areas, or strokes, I should say. Just with our line work. So we're gonna kind of keep doing that now with some line work. So we're gonna come over on this shape. So this is our tree, our tree area. So what we're gonna do first is we're gonna darken up this line. And so you can see what I'm doing is I'm kind of making a sketchy line. But I'm making it darker at the same time. Right. And the reason I'm kind of making it bumpy, right? Because it's a tree and it's kind of the texture, right? I'm going to do that all the way down here. Now that's the true separating line of the tree. And I'm also going to do it on the other side of where our owl friend is coming out of the tree. Now, once we have that, we're going to come down and we're going to come in between this line and this section. And we're going to start adding some shaded lines. Again, kind of like the shading that we did for the value scale of, we're going to now do number 2 value. So not so light, but the next value. So a little bit darker. And again, what we're doing is we're kind of skipping some space, you can see, and then making these shaded strokes. We're recreating some of the texture of the bark. And we're going to go all the way down. It does look like frowns. Absolutely. Yep, this section absolutely looks like frowns. You got it. Okay, now we're going to now add some more lines. This time, again, kind of smile lines, right? So we're going to go to the right of this line. And this line, you know what? Let's make this line a little darker. This is this line right here. So for now, we're making it, again, sort of that number 2 value, a little bit darker. And when we get to down here, we're going to add a much darker shape like this. On top of this shading area. And we're going to add actually 2 shapes. One more. And one more. Okay. So now we're going to start using strokes with our pencil to create more shading. We're going to start back up here in this section, this whole section here. And we're going to add some kind of smudging. Basically what I'm doing is, so I'm kind of creating some shading like this. And in this part we kind of made it smudged. We're going to go inside and we're going to make sections of that smudge a little darker, like that. And then we're going to go underneath and create, you know, again, kind of our circle, our smile sort of shading strokes by picking up our pencil and kind of quickly sort of making strokes like this. If you go over the, you know, the line where the tree is, you know, starts, you can just erase. We're going to come over here and we're going to make some dark shading, some kind of scribbling on top of that shaded area. Ooh, John Paul, that looks awesome. Nice. Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's a lot to the tree, right? You wouldn't think it. Um, the owl actually goes fast. So now this is sort of an opening in the tree. So we're gonna make an outline of this shape. So we're gonna make that a little bit dark, almost black to the outline. And then inside, we kind of just scribble a little bit going left to right. And then we're going to lightly shade up and down next to this line here. And we're going to start using some more strokes for line work on top of this. So we're going to kind of go this way with our strokes. So on top of each area where we started to kind of make the, the smiley, we're going to go down and kind of shade very lightly in that section. And then we're going to darken up this line here. And we're going to darken up underneath it. Here. And this whole section, we're going to kind of scribble and, make sure that our strokes are kind of seen. So like this, and you can kind of go back and forth, going from left to right. Like that. And then this whole section, we're going to kind of scribble on top of what we did in that, over that shape. So we've got lots of texture happening. We're going to move into these areas that we originally put shading down. We're going to, again, use the side of our pencil and we're going to scribble. A little bit darker, left to right. Darker up top. This one here, kind of a quick scribble. We're going to keep going. Here we are here. A little scribble and then getting lighter as we get down to that shape. So do you see how the texture is kind of coming out with our strokes, right? In between, we're going to make one more kind of line here in between these two. We make a kind of a bent line and then scribble on top of it. Come to this section and make it a little bit darker with our strokes here and here, kind of scribbling. Same with this one, kind of the top part, a little dark, and then go left to right with some scribbling. Here again, scribbling, now in kind of a circular fashion up top, and then a little bit left and right in the rest of it. And now we're going to get darker as we come to this line. So this whole line is going to get darker. So we're going to kind of go on top of it and to the left and start to scribble from left to right, but staying to the left side of the line. When we get here, scribbling over the rest of it, like so. And now we're going to start to add our curved strokes throughout the rest of the white of the paper here on this side. So we're going to come back up here and very lightly kind of shade using the side of the pencil. We're going a little further out to the right side. We're going to keep kind of going over the shaded shapes that we did. And we're making, you know, shaded lines because we're trying to mimic the bark. And as we get to this bottom part, we kind of shade in this section and get just a little bit darker along the edge here with our shading. Now, if you want, you can grab your tortillon and you can kind of smooth out all of the lines of the tree by kind of going, you know, a little bit down, right? And I'm kind of just smoothing out some of the lines. And we're going to go on over to our owl. So we're going to create the nose first. And so with the shading, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do a gradient. First, we're going to go a little bit medium and shade kind of around inside the nose, like so. kind of like on the inside edges. And I'm going to go really close now to the owl. Excuse my fussing with the camera here. And once we do that, we're then going to take our tortillon and we're going to shade in the middle. So we're going to kind of take the area that we shaded and then add it a little to the middle to kind of soften it for now. And we're going to now take our tortillon or whatever we're using, and we're going to now start to soften the edges of around the owl. So what I mean is, here's the first line, right? So sort of the outline, we're just going to soften the line, smooth it out. You want to go inside the owl too and soften all the lines that we drew. Except the eye for now. We're going to leave the eye alone. But we're going down here and we're softening up the line that we drew for the owl. All the lines, like I said, except for the eye area. We're not going to do that yet. Okay, we're going to come back now to the eye. And we're going to make in the middle of the eye dark. So remember, we're going to kind of make sure that we are not coloring in that triangular area. All right, so you want the eye to kind of look like that. And we want to make the outline a lot darker. So think black, right? So press on your pencil for the outline. And then we're going to do the same for the outside of the eye. And then we're going to shade inside the eye a little bit darker on the top half. So not black, but remember sort of that value scale. So next to the black, right? Sort of like a charcoal dark. And then the rest of it, light. Now we're going to go on top of the eye. And right up against it, we're going to make this line a little darker. So you can see where I'm kind of doing that, right? And now there's going to be a little bit of a curve here because that's a bit of the fur. We're going to get darker, but a little bit smudgy for this outline up top of the eye. We're also going to add just a little bit darker of shading inside the eye, right underneath where we have that, rectangular area. And we'll get a little darker on the right side of where the pupil is. So I'm going to take my pencil and really make it dark. And then we're going to make it a little bit darker with the shading in this area on the right side of the eye. So there's a few different values going on here. We're going to add a little bit of medium shading right here on the left side of the eye. That's going to bring us to the nose area. And we're going to shade a little bit darker into, this is the feathers. We're going to add 2 more shaded little areas right above. So again, I'm kind of shading, but also creating strokes at the same time. When you're done, you're going to outline the nose. And you're going to start to add some curved strokes on the inside of the nose on the right side and going towards the edge to make it a little darker. And then you're going to start making curved fur on this side of the nose. And it gets a little bit darker right here at the bottom by shading. John Paul, that looks awesome. Beautiful. Now we're going to get pretty detailed because we're going to move up here. This is the most detailed area, the head. So we're going to start up first at the ear. And so this part of the ear is a little darker. So I'm shading a little darker. And what you're going to notice is my lines of shading are going to start to go above where I drew because these are feathered. You know, he's got feathers and hair. And so we want to give that impression that it's hair. And this line is not really a line, right? This is just kind of the top of his head. And we're going to lightly shade in the ear. So we're giving it a base. And for now, this doesn't matter about which direction, but I go left to right for the ear. We're putting down a base shading, and then we'll get lighter, you know, a little bit darker and then a little darker. We're gonna make a little bit of a shape here for the feathers. So you're gonna make a line like this. And then right under the ear, a shaded area like this, kind of like a line. And we're gonna shade again, really light in this whole area. So this time I'm going in a sort of circular direction. You know, leaving some white of the paper. We're going to do the same thing under his nose and going down on his wing, shading that area. And then the rest of the area real quickly. And then we're going to go up in this area and we're going to shade, but we're going to go really light and shading kind of up and down. Now it's so light. See how you can kind of barely see my strokes? And we're going to hop back down to this area where his nose is. And we're going to come right underneath where his eye and kind of his nose meet. And we're going to make a curve of shading right here. See that little thing? And then in between, we're going to shade lightly because there's a shadow there. And I'm going to make his eye a little darker. Kind of the line around it. Can emphasize that a little more. And then this whole area, it's sort of like the white of the paper. We're going to start making really light strokes to recreate the feathering in that area. Let me see if I can zoom that in. See that? We're going to do that in that whole area because we are recreating. I'm going to go really close. We're recreating the feathering. It's a little darker right here, and the direction changes a little. And then as I get to the edge here, I make it just a little bit darker, kind of around the edge of that shape. Then inside, I make these tiny little strokes to recreate, you know, the hair. We have about two kind of darker areas of dotting. actually a few more right near the nose. 1, 2, 3. So we just shade a little bit darker for that texture. And then we're going to come back up to the top part of the head. And on the top part, we're going to start making sort of scribbled areas that are a little bit darker. And this is recreating kind of the feather look, right? So what I just did there, we're now going to make sections. Kind of doing the first line, right? It's kind of like in a line. But it's also curving with his head. And, you know, it doesn't have to, again, it doesn't have to look exactly like mine, but you want these curved sort of scribble sections because you want it to look like the darker areas of the feathering. So we're going kind of all the way across. And in between, you can make some areas with some more strokes that are a little bit lighter. So that it looks like the fur is a little more shaded. And especially towards the right side here, because there would be some shading from him being kind of a little bit behind the tree. And we're now going to go around the edge of our owl, starting at the ears. So again, kind of scribbling to make that line around him a little more, less of a line and more like fur. So we're going here to make a little darker. In this next area, shading a little darker, and then, you know, again, just kind of scribbling with some darker shading around kind of the edge of that section of the ear. So I go back and, you know, shade a little darker. And we're going to go inside the ear And we're going to make some little scribbling for sections of the ear that are a little darker of the fur. So the way I do that, again, is sort of, you can see that I'm kind of shading on the side with my strokes and leaving space of the paper. Then I get a little bit darker shading along the edge here. Right, so recreating the fur. And then we are finally going to go around the edge all the way around the rest. And basically, we're kind of creating some lines, almost like, you know, the fur is sticking out. So creating strokes along that whole edge so that it looks more like fur and not so much like a line. And there are darker areas, right, along the edge here. So as you're going down towards where the wing meets, here's that wing. And we add a little curve there. Here's the wing. So your paper is probably going to get a little messy. You can always kind of erase it later on. Come down to this section and we start to add kind of shading and scribbling for this part of the wing where we're kind of curving some of our lines. You have a stroke here. And then, you know, smile strokes going down this section here. We're going to do a little bit of shading right here up against where the tree and the feathers are, the wing. This section here is a little darker. And then we have some darker kind of areas of shading here. So we start off with this. And we're going to do this kind of curvy thing. This is the darker, kind of the darker shading of the wing. We have a bit of a curved shape here. And then we're going to go inside and kind of make sort of a weird kind of S shape here. And then we'll shade it in on top of it. So again, it's kind of like a side S shape, and then shade it. Okay, and we're starting our final shading here. And again, we're going to go on top of this whole area, and we're now creating lightly kind of little strokes going kind of curving a bit. And we're going to go right underneath the eye area, but we leave a little bit of this white space here. And we're going to do this kind of close to where, you know, his kind of whisker areas are. We're going to go into the white part of it, and we're going to just add, again, really faint little lines to make it look like, you know, that's still white fur, but little tiny strokes. And then we have an area where we go a little bit darker, and we just make a little bit of sort of an area where the feathers are kind of clumped together like this. And then from there, we start to make some darker shaded areas for, again, kind of the spotting on the owl. This one is kind of curving a little bit towards the wing. As we go along the edge and in this area, we have some darker, kind of some darker shaded areas and some really darker areas along the edge here as we get to the wing. So again, I always like to kind of go near the eye, and one more time, add a little more darker area right underneath where the eyelid area is happening. Underneath the eye. And then if anything looks a little bit too sort of dark, or, you know, you need some light, especially right up here where the ear is, I like to take the end of my eraser and just kind of scratch into it a little bit with my eraser and just kind of lighten up some of those areas, particularly the feathering here, little on his nose. That is our hiding winter owl. You can go back and make, certain things a little darker along like the edge here of him if you want, going back and kind of, scribbling, making some of the fur stick out. But I'm so curious to see what everyone's looks like. So I'm going to remove my spotlight and stop the recording. Let's see.